Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Brandon, your trusted realtor. I'm here with my friend and friend of the show, Ray Thomas. Hey, Ray, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am, you know what? If I was doing any better, I couldn't stand it. So I am, so thank you. So today, Ray, we are going to talk about obviously within the scope of the show, home ownership. And I wanted to just really talk to you a little bit more about your home because I've been in your home. You throw some great Christmas parties. And just, well, I think there's actually one coming up that was supposed to be done in like April, right? But like with social distancing, that's kind of preventing that whole soiree from happening.
Yes.
So,
Unfortunately, that's thrown a wrench in my plans, but we'll make up for that.
right, exactly. We get a rain check, right? A to be continued.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate you joining me today. I want to dive right into kind of the topic or the conversation today, which is ownership and what that looks like for you. And so I know you have a beautiful home, you have a beautiful townhouse. So talk to me a little bit. How long have you been in your property?
So May will be 2 years. I
Okay.
closed May 15th of 2018.
Okay. And so how was that process for you? Well, actually, let's back up. Before we talk about the process and how that was for you, what led you to the decision that you wanted to buy like 2 years ago? Do you remember like that day?
So before I made the decision to buy, it's something that I had wanted to do in my head for a long time. And so I had set a goal that I wanted to own a home by the time I turned 40. So that was my aim. Especially as an African American male, a lot of us don't own property.
Mhm.
And so completing this milestone was really important for me.
Okay. So and so that's actually a really good touch point. What were some of the things that you felt were I guess either like barriers you wanted to break or like
So I led within my head because I frequently spent time on a lot of the housing apps, just looking at houses and looking at prices, and then looking at my bank account. And the two just did not, unfortunately, match up. So I was like, I want this, but then I'm looking at how much money I have in the bank, and I'm thinking there's no way that this is something that's going to be attainable for me. So that was one of the biggest hindrances.
okay.
And it wasn't until I decided to sit down, and so I sat down with like a financial advisor, and we looked at how I'm spending my money and where it's going, and what I would need to be able to get closer to that process. And so I had to sit down and alter my spending a whole lot um, because it really wasn't as unattainable as I thought it was. And I think a lot of people think that it's really a difficult process. Now, obviously, there are some baseline things that you need to have in order to do that, but it really was not that difficult of a process altogether. Um, and then I'm also the first person in my family to actually purchase a home. And so, people say all the time it's an investment. And so I've always said, whatever property I purchase, whatever property I end up with, when I leave this earth, I want to put some type of clause in my final arrangements that this house cannot be sold. It must remain in the family.
Yeah. And that makes sense. But having a sense of ownership and being able to pass something down and leaving really a legacy, creating some sense. And that's kind of, it sounds like that's what I'm hearing. Like you wanted to create some, to be able to own something and then be able to pass something down and have that legacy. Let's talk back about when you said the process is not that hard, right? And you said something that I think resonate with a lot of people, which is you looked at your bank account and you looked at what your goal was and maybe there may have been a situation where it was somewhere like that, right? Talk
Mhm.
to me a little bit about how did you feel that gap?
So, like I said, I had to alter my spending once I looked at where my money was going
Okay.
and realized that a lot of the places my money was going were places that weren't necessarily necessities. They were more short-time fulfillment. Um, so it just took a little bit of discipline to actually sit down and say, okay, I'm not going to eat out every week. I'm not going to brunch every weekend. I'm not going to the mall. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to set aside a certain percent of my paycheck every month. And so doing just little things like that over time helped me to get closer to my financial goal that I would need in order to, put down the down payment.
How much time did it take in changing your habits, or did you use some type of programs?
So I did not use any of the programs, which kind of in retrospect, I kind of wish that I had. But because I wanted to do this by the time I turned 40, I was up against the clock. And I know the programs are really helpful, but sometimes they can be a little lengthy. So it was the combination of me actually saving money, and I also did use some money from my 401k because I could take that out and not have to pay taxes on it. And I have another 20 plus years ahead of me. So I felt like I was okay with taking a small amount out of that in order to do this.
And you know what? That's really a great pivot point, is that a lot of times we don't realize that advantage of upfront investing in ourselves using the company 401k or option plan, because as one of the additional options is that's really like if you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it was like a forced savings plan. Like you probably were saving anyways, right, when you got paid, but it's a little bit easier to transfer the money from your savings account to your checking account and then go out to brunch and then spend, especially if you go out to DC on a Sunday, you'll easily spend $150 just on yourself at brunch and bottle.
Okay.
Yeah. So that 401k becomes a quick, it's money that you never see that gets directly deposited into an account. And then if you have a level of consistency with your employer, it becomes a opportunity, just like you are talking about, to be able to leverage it in order to buy a house. And I can imagine that you're probably the interest rate, if you don't mind me probing, the interest rate that you're probably paying is probably lower than probably the interest rate on your credit cards, right? To pay back.
Oh yeah, much lower.
So it's much lower. So it's actually worked better for you to use that, because I can imagine that, for DC Open Doors, their current program they do a down payment assistance program, right? I know you're in Maryland, but the interest rate that they charge for that loan is 2.75% right now. That's what they're charging right now. Would you say that your interest rate is lower than 2.75%?
It's around that.
Okay. So, so that's huge. So that's really less than like $500 a year as it relates to like interest and stuff that you would be paying on a loan, potentially for down payment. So that's really that's significant that you were able to leverage the money that you already had put to the side. And so in repaying this, that means you're going to replenish the 401k, right? Okay. So over what did you get to choose how many years you wanted to pay it back, and did you get to set the amount of the repayment schedule?
So you mean the term of the loan?
Yeah, for the 401k loan.
Oh, so it was. I'm trying to. I don't think I chose a repayment. I don't think there's a time period on it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But it essentially gives you more flexibility. Do you feel like some of the programs, right? And you probably, what was the turnaround time for you to get the funds more immediate? So that way, did you feel like you had the ability to move a little bit faster with making a decision, like a little bit more freedom?
So I did inquire about the time frame in advance, and the whole process of taking it out of my 401k and having the check in my hand was less than a week.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so that's huge. Yeah. So, and that becomes really the difference when you're using like a program. You really set yourself up in a place where you had options. One of probably the downfalls is that probably in hindsight you're thinking, and like you said, if I use some programs and that's almost quote unquote free money, that would have been available for you to use.
I'm an impulse buyer just by nature, so I just did not want to do the program. Like I was like, I want this house, I want it now.
Yeah, okay. And I can imagine the area that you're in is highly competitive. You're in fairly close price. What's around you that would make that area fairly competitive?
So I'm right across the street from a metro, and I think that is the biggest draw for this area. And it's pretty centrally located. So for people who don't take the metro, it's right by the interstate, so you can hop on. And they're doing a lot of development in this neighborhood as well. I actually found this house, and I put the offer in. It had been on the market for 1 day.
Okay. And did you have
Yeah.
any competition? Was it a competitive situation, or were you the only offer?
So the way it happened was the house that I'm living in now was not my first choice. I had actually put in an offer on another home that appraised for less than the asking price. The seller was an investor who could afford to hold on to the property and chose not to lower the price. So that deal fell through at the last minute. At that time, I was currently living in my apartment. I had given notice to my landlord that I was leaving. He had actually already rented out the apartment. So it was scheduled for me to vacate that property.
Oh, so you were
So I,
almost pretty much like in a period for like 5 minutes, you were homeless.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So once that deal fell through, I found this house like the next day. And so I told my agent that, I wanted to put in an offer on this house. So he calls up the owner and is like, my client loves the house. He wants to make an offer. There's only one stipulation. And so she says, well, what's that? He says, you have to be out in 2 weeks. So she laughs, thinking it's a joke. And he's like, no, I'm serious. Like, he wants the house. Can you be out in 2 weeks? So she's like, let me talk to my husband, and I'm going to give you a call back. So she calls back. He's like, well, I'll talk to my husband. Can you give us 3 weeks? Give us 3 weeks, and it's a deal. So he called me. I was like, all right, I can do 3 weeks. Let's make it happen.
That is awesome. So where'd you go for that 1 week holdover period?
Here, there.
Just kind of put your stuff in storage and house hunt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I actually put my stuff all in a U-Haul truck and just kept the truck for a couple of days.
Okay, nice. Oh, that's and it saved you some money on the front end, so you didn't have to make a commitment to like a storage facility. And
Right.
okay, yeah, all right, nice. And
The house. My agent said, "This is the look I've been waiting for from you," because I just somehow that me and the house had a connection, but apparently it was not meant for me. So the house that I wanted, it was a single family home. Looking back at it in retrospect, and I hate to admit this, sometimes I still go online and look at the photos of this house. It had a lot of yard space, and so now I am kind of glad that I didn't do it because there was no HOA on that other house, and I know I wouldn't be cutting grass. So I think that where I am now, even though I want the other house, I think that the one that I am in now is a much better investment as it relates to property value.
okay,
Hey, what's going on, fam? So, hopefully, you enjoyed the video, and the rest of it's gonna come later this week. So, make sure you subscribe and like the video so you can stay tuned in to the newest information, and also click that notification button so that way you're always in tune and tuned in to the latest.